Join the Coven. Happy Halloween from the gas station. A story written by Jack Townsend. Links to his Reddit and Amazon author page available in the description and pinned comment below. It didn't take long for Owen to establish that he was in charge. Part of me was thankful to hand over the responsibility in a time like this, but I couldn't ignore the glaring fact that Owen was the kind of guy who didn't know just how much he didn't know, and his false sense of complete competency was almost certainly going to make matters worse. He ordered everyone to the front of the store for the start of his investigation. Jerry came along quietly and peacefully. We found Bart laying low in the back office by the time clock. One of the mischief cats made a surprise appearance, but scrambled on top of the drink case and disappeared before Owen could line up and take a shot, which only left the man even more furious. Deep down, I was secretly rooting for the raccoons. With all the remaining live victims in one place, Owen took my flashlight and stood guard at the booth while the five of us sat quietly awaiting our new fearless leader's plan. Yen and Lucy sat on one side. I took the aisle seat, Jerry the wall, with Bart crammed between us. Owen began. "All right, first things first. Which one of you did it?" His interrogation skills left more than a little to be desired. When no confessions were immediately forthcoming, he continued. "That's all right. We'll figure it out. In the meantime, nobody is going anywhere." His light was shaking, a dead tell that his brave and cocky persona was little more than a bluff. He needed help, which I tried to offer. Maybe we should call the authorities and tell them what happened. As soon as I started speaking, Owen blinded me with his light. He held it there until a few seconds after I stopped. Perhaps he was taking the time to consider my suggestion, or maybe he was just letting a little amount of power go to his head. Finally, he lowered the light and said, "Yeah, okay, let's call the cops. But I don't trust any of you." He shook the flashlight at my side of the table. "Yen, you and the orange mouse girl were sitting right here when it happened, so I know neither of you are the killer. Take this." He gave Yen the spare flashlight. "Go call 911. Tell them where we are. Tell them a man is dead, and I've got it narrowed down to 3 suspects." As Yen made her way to the store phone, I tried to explain. "Actually, 911 doesn't work in this town. You have to call the sheriff's department." "Dude," Bart said forcefully, "your town really sucks." "Yeah, I know." "You 3, shut up," snapped the man with the gun. "We're going to get to the bottom of this one way or another." "Owen!" Yen called out, a note of fear lining the edge of her voice. "Yeah? The phones are dead." Of course the night is unfolding like this. Why should I even be surprised that this is all happening all over again? What? He left us in the dark and headed towards Yen. As soon as he went out of whisper range, Lucy leaned forward and quietly asked, "Okay guys, what's really going on?" I leaned forward to whisper back, "I legitimately don't know. Is there someone else in here with us?" "Possibly." I heard the deep breaths she took before asking, "Did one of you kill that man?" Jerry answered, "I think it's more than reasonable to assume that the raccoons did it." Thankfully, Jerry sounded like his old self. It felt good to have him back. But I wasn't about to forget how he had just fugu stated in the supply closet. Was that some kind of temporary insanity? Possession? There were too many possibilities and not nearly enough time for me to form a good plan. Owen was back before I knew it. "All right, let's work this out. You, delivery guy, where were you when the man was stabbed?" Bart's answers were matter of fact. "I was hiding." "Why?" "I saw a gun come out, and I don't get paid enough to take a bullet." Owen flicked the light at me. "What about you?" I answered, "I also don't get paid enough to take a bullet." "You know what I mean, jerk." I made a phone call. Then I went to see if I could find the raccoons. Interesting, he said, turning that simple word into an implicit accusation. How was that interesting? Lucy asked. The phone was sabotaged. Someone cut the line out of the wall, and it looks like they used a knife to do it. You're saying you were the last one to use the phone. Is it really possible that the killer waited for you to hang up, sliced the cable, then snuck past you and killed the old man? I shrugged. Owen kept it up. He was wearing one of those stupid face masks, but it was already bloody when we first got here. What's the story behind that? Cherry laughed. Oh, that was me. He was acting a fool, so I cracked his face chimney like a boss. Owen turned the light onto Jerry, who had at some point pulled his own sharp-toothed smiling mask back over his face. Owen asked, "Are you prone to violent outbursts?" Bart chimed in. "Come to think of it, you did tackle me pretty hard." "Thank you," Jerry responded. I could see which way the winds were blowing, and I didn't like it. Jerry had been acting strangely for most of the night, but I knew him well enough to know that he was innocent. I also knew him well enough to know he was the worst person to advocate for his own innocence. "Owen," Yen called. "What? Take a look at this." He left us once again to join the woman standing in the corner of the room with her flashlight pointed at the code green box. Lucy whispered, "I don't like this. That guy is unhinged. He shouldn't be in charge." Bart leaned forward and put his head in his hands. "This is so messed. I just want to go home." "What about the rest of your shift?" I asked, trying to keep the mood light. "There is no rest of the shift, man. I just said that so you guys would let me get out of here. Everybody I work with knows the rules. This is what I get for breaking them." This was another unexpected curveball. "What do you mean?" "This gas station is always the end of the route. When I started working, everybody told me the same thing about this place. Get in and get out. Never start a conversation with the workers. Never stay longer than necessary. Never go to the bathroom. I get paid double to run this route because no one else wants to do it. I just assumed it was because this gas station is in the middle of clan country. Now I'm sitting here waiting for Mr. Good Guy with the gun to decide my fate for real. Frig this town. And everyone in it." "Hey!" Owen yelled. "No talking!" "Yes, sir, boss," Bart shouted sarcastically. We sat in somber silence until he returned to the table with a box in his hands and Yen by his side. He reached inside the kit, pulled out the pack of surgical masks, and dropped them onto the table. It appeared as if someone had taken a knife to the pack, slicing holes through the lot of them. "Someone is sabotaging our supplies," Yen asked. "Who would do something like this and why?" "I don't know," Owen answered, "but I intend to find out." They both immediately turned around and pointed their lights at the sound of something crashing loudly onto the ground. Whatever it was, it came from the bathroom. "Go check it out," Owen said. "Are you crazy?" Yen answered. "That's where the body was. You go check." "And leave the killer unguarded?" Owen looked back at her, then at us, then at the bathroom, then at the gun. With a short sigh, he made the difficult but responsible decision to hand his weapon over to Yen while he courageously went to check out the noise by himself. Ha! I'm just kidding. Can you imagine? No. Instead, Owen decided to go for the Jerk of the Year award by ordering me out of the booth to be his literal human shield. As we left the others behind, he promised the group he'd shoot anyone who tried anything funny. Then, with the barrel of his gun stabbing me in the back, we went to check on the noise. I clocked the baseball bat still standing on the ground in the hallway where I dropped it. But even if I was crazy enough to make a go for it, the weapon was on the other side of the bathroom as we approached the door. Owen pulled the gun out of my back and rested it on my shoulder, then shoved me forward with his elbow. He stayed right behind me as the flashlight reached the inside of the bathroom. Just as I had expected, the culprits were fattened, furry trash pandas. There were only 3 of them, which was somehow way scarier than all 4 of them. One had evidently torn the soap dispenser from the wall, the source of that crashing noise, and a rather impressive feat on its own. It was leaned over, front paws in the soap puddle, lapping it up by mouthful. Gross. But not nearly as gross as the other two raccoons, the ones hunched over in the corner greedily licking the puddle of human blood. As if blood-hungry raccoons weren't bad enough, I noticed that something important was missing from this picture. Or I guess someone. The body of Abram was nowhere to be found, and I was nearly positive that these animals couldn't have carried him off on their own. They all moved in perfect unison, licking the floor, suddenly stopping once they realized they were being watched, slowly lifting their heads, slowly turning to face us. "Hey guys," I said with a wave, "did any of you see the body of a bearded man?" The animal sprung at us, teeth first. Owen shoved me to the ground and screamed. His light hit the floor, bounced against the wall, and started spinning, giving the hallway an intense strobe light effect. "What is it? Oh my god, are you okay? Look out!" For some inexplicable reason, the others decided it would be a good idea to rush towards us. Owen screamed like a baby, and then bang! Damn! What the? Oh my god! Bang, bang! The room smelled like gunfire. A raccoon jumped onto my lap and launched itself down the hallway. Owen cursed and picked up the flashlight and cursed some more. Then he aimed it at me, and then he aimed it back at the others. Then my blood ran cold. Oh my god! Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Hold your hand right here! Damn! Put pressure over the wound! Yen, Lucy, and Jerry were all standing over Bart. He was on his back, staring up at the ceiling, blood on his hands and all over his polo shirt. Owen turned away from them and pointed the flashlight back at me. "God damn it," he muttered. Yen shouted his name. "Owen, shine the flashlight over here." He waited for a few seconds, took a loud breath, and did so. Bart's eyes were rolling back in his head. Jerry had his hands clamped firmly over the wound on Bart's stomach. Lucy had specks of blood all over her face. Yen stood up and shouted, "We need gauze and a medical kit, whatever you have. Please, right now." As I pushed myself back up to my feet, Owen blurted, "He came right at me. You all saw it. He came running straight for me." His voice ticked up an octave. "Why did you do that? I warned you. Didn't you hear me? You all heard me. Tell him to stay back, and he ran right at me." I shoved open the door to the supply closet. In the complete dark of the room, I was forced to navigate by memory. I reached out for the space where the code yellow kit should have been, grabbed the whole box, and brought it out to the hallway. When I hit the ground next to the others, Owen was still blathering. "It's not my fault. It was an accident. He came charging at me. Does he have a weapon on him?" Lucy snapped at him with venom in her word. "What? Check his pockets. He probably has a weapon. He was probably..." "Shut up!" He did, for now. I handed the supplies over to Yen, who apparently knew her way around a med kit better than me. As she ripped open the bag of clotting powder with her teeth, I asked, "Are you some kind of doctor or something?" "Or something," she said, following it quickly with instructions for Jerry to move his hands. She stayed working for what felt like forever, but was probably only about 30 seconds. I couldn't really watch. Not because I was bothered by violence, but because I was steadily recalculating my chances of getting to that baseball bat without Owen noticing. She put her hand to Bart's neck, presumably to check his pulse, then announced, "We need to get him to a hospital right now." "Okay," Jerry said, popping to his feet. "I'll make a run for Lucy's car and bring it right up to the door. I've probably got the best night vision and the most experience driving in the dark without headlights. Lucy, key me." Owen immediately shot down that idea like it were an innocent alcohol vendor. "Oh no, you are not." Lucy stood and took a step forward, only stopping when Owen pointed the gun right at her. "What is your problem?" she shouted. "We still don't know who killed that man." I'm not letting a murderer out of my sight. You, he pointed the gun at Jerry. And you, he pointed the gun at me. Get up. Move over here. He herded us into the hallway with his weapon, leaving Bart clinging precariously to life. Yen tried to reason with him. Owen, we don't have time for this. We need to get help. I can't let them out of my sight. His gun was shaking wildly. The one pointed right at me. The one with the finger on the trigger. Jerry's voice was noticeably calmer than the situation deserved. With bloody palms extended forward, he said, "Hey, dude, relax. Nobody here thinks you're an incompetent man-baby with a gun. We're all going to be like the Fonz, okay? And you know what the Fonz is? He's cool. And you know what's cooler than cool? The cooler. Yes, like that walk-in cooler." "What?" he snapped. "Why don't you put Jack and me inside the walk-in cooler? Then you can take that chair behind the counter and barricade us inside. We do that all the time when we need to detain people until the cops arrive. Right, Jack? That way you know you're safe, and you can hand that gun over to someone with a better aim and use the CB radio in the supply closet to call for help." I was completely shocked by how completely reasonable that plan sounded. Owen's hand was shaking a little less now. "Well," I said, "it's not the worst idea." "Just do it," yelled Yen. "All right," he relented, "but no funny business." Jerry laughed. "It's a walk-in cooler. What kind of trouble could we possibly get into in there?" I really hate it when Jerry says stuff like that. It's almost like he's straight up daring the universe to screw with us. As soon as the cooler door shut behind us, all sound and light went away. For a moment I felt like I entered a sensory deprivation chamber, but soon my ears acclimated, and I could hear my coworker breathing. "I hope you have some kind of plan," I said. The room lit up temporarily as Jerry lit a cigarette. His toothy smile mask was down around his neck like a scarf. A moment later, the room returned to black, save for the tiny red glowing ember at the tip of his smoke. "Nah," he said, "that was my whole plan. Get that guy calmed down enough to stop shooting for a second. Phase 1 was a success. You're the smart one. Why don't you come up with the rest of it?" "Well," I said, working through the puzzle out loud, "unfortunately there's no way to break out of here. Walls are 8 inches thick, which means they probably can't even hear us out there. Even if we did manage to break out, that D-bag would probably shoot us the second he saw us. I hate to say it, but this might actually be the best thing we can do. Just sit here and hope help arrives in time to save Bart." He took a puff, then said, "Bart's a goner." "You don't know that. Trust me, I saw the wound. He's got another 5 minutes at most. It's really too bad. I liked that guy." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Jerry had said all he needed to say, so he was also said nothing. When the cigarette was gone, we stayed in silence until something scraped across the floor on the other side of the cooler. I almost didn't ask. "What was that?" "You heard it too, huh?" "Hey, Jerry?" "Yeah? I almost forgot to mention this, but when I looked inside the bathroom..." "Yeah?" "Abram wasn't there anymore." "Oh, don't worry. That wasn't actually Abram." "It wasn't?" "No." "Then what was it?" "Well, it's kinda hard to explain." We heard another scrape. This one slightly louder and slightly closer. "Jerry?" "Yeah?" "Is there something you wanted to tell me?" "Oh, right, about that. Another scrape. Only a few feet away. Are we in danger right now?" Yes, we are." I reached into my hoodie pocket and inspected my inventory. I had a lighter and a can of bug spray, which meant I had an emergency flamethrower. I also had Bart's cell phone, which meant I had a flashlight. This was quite the dilemma. How to proceed? "Jerry, I'm about to turn on a flashlight. Should I just accept that there's another ridiculous jump scare waiting for us the moment this room is lit up?" "That would be a fair assumption." "Okay then, Let's do this. I turned on the flashlight and held it out in front of me. A few feet away from us stood the unicorn. More specifically, a man wearing the unicorn mask. A man with a smoker-stained yellow beard poking out from underneath. A man who looked an awful like Abram. He stood upright, gazing into our souls with unicorn eyes. Copious amounts of blood staining the front of his shirt, and the handle of a fillet knife protruding from the center of his chest. Part 4. Come on, man, you do it, I argued. No way, you're already missing a finger, you do it, Jerry argued back. How does that make me more qualified to pull off his mask? I'm just saying, if he bites you, you've got a little less to lose. Well, maybe it's your turn to lose a digit. We had been standing in the cooler for about 5 minutes, bickering back and forth. The blood-soaked thing in the unicorn mask had been right there with us the whole time, standing completely still like it was some sort of mix-and-match Halloween decoration. The phone battery was getting low, and the last thing I wanted was to be stuck in the dark with whatever this was. Jerry and I both agreed that it would be a wise course of action to remove the mask and see what we were dealing with. We disagreed on how to do it. All right, Jerry said, lighting yet another cigarette. How about this? We play rock, paper, scissors. Loser has to remove the mask. No way. Why not? Because you always pick rock. You never not pick rock. And if we play and I beat you and then you remove the mask and get your hand bitten off, I'm going to feel really guilty. Aw, he said. Thanks. How about we just pull it off together on the count of 3? All right. We both crept closer to the unicorn. It stayed perfectly still. Together we reached out and grabbed the mask by either side. Okay, I started, on the count of 3. Okay. I took a deep breath. My heart was beating like crazy. I didn't know what to expect, but no matter what it was, I was not ready. Regardless, I started the count. 1, 3, Jerry yelled, ripping off the mask. We both took a step back. Oh, I said. It was probably the least surprising thing possible. Just good old dead Abram. Lips slightly parted, eyes wide open, face pale and devoid of life. Jerry sounded almost disappointed. Well, that was stupid. I tried talking to the dead man, even though I knew that wasn't going to work. Hey, Mr. Abram, can you hear me? A low croak escaped his mouth. At least, I thought it wasn't going to work. What did he just say, I asked? Jerry dropped the cigarette onto the floor and stomped it out. I think he said to believe. That mean anything to you? Abram's head cocked back slightly as another hoarse noise began spilling out of his throat. The sound was somewhere between an annoyed cow and an angry frog. A rancid smell like vinegar and onions filled the air. Jerry visibly gagged and pulled his mask back over his mouth. Feel better? He asked Abram. I wasn't expecting a response. In fact, I was very much hoping there wasn't going to be a response. But sure enough, a response we had. It felt like he was sounding out the words to the Macarena, very, very slowly. To my ears, it was just creaky gibberish. But then hand gestures got involved. The Abram abomination lifted both hands up to the middle of the knife and wrapped all of his fingers around it. I thought he was going to pull it out, but I was wrong. He continued to mumble hard syllables as he forced the knife downward, ripping his chest wide open and spilling wet, gooey intestines all over the floor in a steaming pile. Green dots the size of sugar ants skittered forth from inside his open wound cavity. They crawled away from the sliding blade and took flight, filling the air with a swarm of infant green mayflies. The knife reached the bottom of his beer belly, but it was only a short snag. The thing continued to disembowel itself, cutting straight down through the belt and causing the pants to fall to the ground. More and more of those bugs dropped or crawled out of him. Some were even flying out directly. At this point, I realized to my dismay that the guts on the floor were squirming, rich with life, with those baby insects. It seemed that Abram's blood was thick and lousy with mayfly larvae. I didn't even realize that we were moving away until our backs hit the cold door. I kept my eyes on Abram as I banged on the door as hard as I could. My hair was itching now. Those baby mayflies were landing on me, crawling into my nose and ears and getting caught in my eyelashes. Whenever they piled too thick over the phone, I'd flick my wrist and send a miniature green dust cloud into the air that hovered, it reamassed, and settled onto the phone again. Only when the knife had gone as far as Abram could push it did I realize I needed to start doing something if I didn't want to end up like him or worse. I brought out the can of bug spray, yelled, "Hold your breath," and started blasting. The amassment of green died on impact, plummeting to the ground in thick clumps like wool being sheared from the sky. As they died, the body of Abram seemed to react, launching its head back and screaming in a voice like a fork scraping against a glass plate. The noise ended abruptly as a lump the size of a gumball pressed against his neck from the inside, working its way up from the stomach until it emerged from Abram's open mouth. I stopped spraying. The game had just changed, and I didn't want to play anymore. I turned around and banged on the door with enough force to bruise my hands, elbows, and one of my knees. But I knew it was all for naught. They couldn't hear us out there, and the door was not opening until someone on the other side deemed it so. I slowly turned back to face what was waiting. The thing had started evacuating Abram's mouth. About 3 inches of needle legs, green armadillo scales, and 2 bulging eyes crawled up Abram's face. "I knew it!" Jerry laughed. What? What did you know? What could you possibly know?" The legs operated in waves like those of a millipede, and when the entire half-foot of horror had finally emerged, it left Abram's mouth to the sound of a wet thoink. The old man's empty shell instantly went ragdoll and collapsed in a heap on top of his guts, and the demon millipede rolled into a ball and launched itself towards us. Jerry went left. I went right. The phone escaped my grip, and the light hit the floor. I heard the millipede ram into the door and bounce off, and then I lost track of it. Jerry screamed, "There!" and pointed. I turned just in time to see it scaling the wall before leaping at me. Suddenly the floor whipped out from under my feet, and I hit a pile of human debris butt first. I'd accidentally slipped in a puddle of Abram, and not a second too soon. The green bug whizzed over my head. Great! "Yoinks!" Jerry yelled. I looked up to see that the millipede had landed and attached itself to him at stomach level. Not great. I got to my feet and at his side as quickly as I could, but the millipede had already climbed about a foot up Jerry's body. I tried to get a hold, but the way it moved made that impossible. Each time a leg landed, the tips hooked into Jerry, through his shirt, and into his flesh. Every time I pulled, I was pulling 100 needles. Each step it took left one hole and made another. It crawled up Jerry's chest and neck, leaving a trail of countless bleeding pinpricks. "Damn it," Jerry said, straining his eyes to watch the thing that had just passed his chin. I pulled out the lighter, flicked it on, and held the flame against the green shell, but there was no effect. Damn it, damn it, damn it, what's he doing now? Ah, gross, 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 gross. The millipede stopped and perched on top of Jerry's face mask, almost like it was trying to figure out what it was looking at. I'd run out of good ideas by this point, so I just went with brute strength, grabbed the millipede by its head, and yanked. I may as well have grabbed a broken glass bottle. The teeth or claws or whatever I touched ripped the flesh off my palm down to the bone. I instinctively fell to the ground and hugged my hand as it squirted blood, with enough force to make me consider doing something serious about my blood pressure, if I somehow survived the night. I snapped out of it and played through the pain. Jerry was going to need help if... Oh God! The millipede used its front 2 leg claws to slice a perfect slit over Jerry's mask, then proceed to crawl down his freaking throat. He lurched forward onto his hands and knees, wincing hard for at least a minute. Then he started exhaling in forceful spurts like he was working up a hairball. "Jerry," I said, are you okay?" He spat out a long, slimy stream of blood and then made a noise that sounded like ka, hug. He lifted his head up and looked at me. Through the tattered mask, I could see a real smile on his face. "Jerry?" His sounds turned into laughter. "Jerry?" His laughter turned into a cackle. "Jerry?" He stood up. He wasn't looking at me anymore. And when he spoke, bloody spittle frothed out of his mouth. "Yeah, you don't like that, do you?" "What's going on?" I asked. "Oh, I'm sorry. Is that inhospitable to you?" Jerry punched himself in the stomach. "How's about now, huh?" He punched himself again. "Yeah, that's right, biatch. This is my house. Ain't nobody burning it down except for me." He lurched forward and hit the ground, barely able to get his hands out in front in time to stop from cracking open his face on the floor. A huge splattering of red and green expelled forth from his mouth like we were in The Exorcist. The projectile vomit coated the floor, and in the center of the slop was the writhing body of the millipede. It flicked around a few times, then formed a ball and rolled away into a corner. "Jerry!" I screamed. "Are you even alive right now? Have you seen my cigarettes? I could really go for a smoke right about now." "Holy Jack, it's on your sleeve!" "What?" I looked down and saw the hellspawn millipede racing up my arm. I grabbed at it, but the moment my fingers touched, it latched in the needle legs. It hurt a lot worse than Jerry's reaction made it seem. But I suppose his tattoo collection probably gave him a better frame of reference for this kind of pain. If I had to think of something to compare it to, I'd say being stabbed by 1,000 needles over and over again. Yeah, there's really nothing comparable. Jerry pulled off his belt and flung it around the neck of the creature. As he pulled, the needles tore into my skin. He pulled again, hard enough to knock me off balance. I hit the ground all over again, and the damn thing just deepened its grip. It was at my shoulder, the eyes staring right at my mouth. Blood, vomit, and bile dripping from its wet shell. Jerry tried yanking again, but this time the bug just clawed the belt in half. As Jerry tumbled to the ground, I realized I was all out of luck. The needle stabbed into my neck, then my chin. I clenched my teeth together as tight as I could, tight enough that I was certain they'd shatter if I kept it up. But the millipede didn't let me. It extended a pair of front legs and sliced the mask off my face. Then, with 2 more legs, it pried open my lips. With several legs, it grabbed hold of my front teeth and forced open my mouth. Jerry sat up and looked right at me as the thing plunged into my mouth and down my throat faster than I could bite. Pain ripped into me from everywhere. That was a close call, but I made it. It shouldn't have been so close. It never had been this close before. Was I getting sloppy in my old age? I'm at my prime. It's these hosts. There's something wrong with them. They're not normal. Wait, hang on, what? Jerry helped me to my feet. "Jack, listen, can you hear me?" Yeah? It's gonna be okay, okay? Did I just swallow a monster bug? Damn, what the hell was even wrong with this one? These reaction times are pathetic. And what is going on with this leg? At least this is inhabitable, but how can I hurt anyone with these weak hands? Wait, I know. I just need to find that knife. I looked around for the knife that Abram had stabbed himself with, but... Wait, why was I looking for Abram's knife? And how did I know that Abrams stabbed himself? Well, because I was there, of course. I was inside Abram when it happened. No, I was Abram. I waited until I had all the food together in one place, and then I began the harvesting. I needed my children to have something to eat when the time was ready. Duh. Wait, no, none of that made sense. Whose memories are in my head right now? Jerry put a flask into my hand. Look, dude, here's the thing. I know you're fighting for control of your mind right now, but if there's any of you left in there, you gotta drink this. What is it? It's the reason she couldn't live inside of me. No way. Throw that down right now. Do not drink it. I don't want to drink it. Good, then don't drink it. I wasn't planning on drinking it. Good, great. I'm glad we're in agreement. Lovely. I opened the flask and threw it back. The whole time it went down my throat, I could hear two different voices in my head screaming at me that this was a bad idea. I knew they were both right, but sometimes bad ideas are the only ones we have. As I drained the flask, I realized that the mystery drink was not as, shall we say, lethal as most of Jerry's concoctions. It just tasted like soap and sugar and a little more. When it was finally done, I dropped it onto the floor. Jerry laughed, but it wasn't his normal laugh. It wasn't the showing off how cool I am laugh, or the I just thought of a funny laugh, or even the whoops. Didn't mean to send you that dick pic laugh. It was a nervous, concerned laugh. Wow, he said, you drank the whole thing? Was I not supposed to? No, that's fine. I'm just impressed. Why? It didn't taste that alcoholic. It wasn't alcohol. Oh God, I'm about to be sick. I felt red-hot pangs shooting through my intestines. What is this? You stupid, what are these things called anyway? People? How can I possibly be losing this bad to people? They're food. I needed to get away. I needed to regroup. I needed a plan. But this one was fighting me for control of his mind, and that meant I couldn't come up with a plan until after I disconnected. It wouldn't take long to kill this one, though. All I had to do was shred some organs. It could be done in a matter of seconds. These bodies are so frail, but this fire, whatever it was, I couldn't bear it for another moment. I fell onto my knees and braced for what I knew was coming. I hacked up the 6-inch millipede with the force of a cannon. The taste of acid and blood filled my mouth, and I felt incredibly weak. I had been chomped down the middle. I felt like all the energy had left in half of my life. My memories evacuated alongside it. Or at least they tried. With what little mental acuity I had left, I snagged an errant memory on its way to the exit. No, you're not going anywhere. You're my memory now. As far as memories go, this was the mother lode. The millipede rolled into a ball in my vomit and promptly launched across the room as Jerry raced up and kicked it, screaming, "Yeeto, mosquito!" I pushed myself up, horrified by the new information now residing inside my head. Jerry, that's the mayfly queen. It's some kind of parasite. Every season it awakens and feeds and finds hosts to lay eggs inside of. And each season they hatch and erupt out of the bodies. That's where the mayflies come from. They come out of humans. And one unlucky schmuck gets to be her vessel for 5 years while she lays dormant and absorbs all the knowledge of her chosen victim. Abram didn't even know that thing was inside of him, and she's been doing this for millions of years. The air pressure suddenly changed. Behind me, the door to the cooler opened wide. I turned just in time to see the queen millipede skitter across the ceiling and out the open door, completely unbeknownst to Lucy, who was standing in the doorway with a look of pure shock on her face.